Hey guys, it's Danny. Alrighty, today we're gonna have a little bit of a discussion. It has to do with orchid nurseries. There is a question that keeps repeating in the comment section below, and this is, how do orchid nurseries do it? Why do their orchids look so fantastically fabulous when we purchase them, and then we need to hassle with repotting, we set them back, we resort to all sorts of weird mediums such as ceramics and all of those things? Why don't we just keep it simple, do what the nurseries do? Because theoretically, we should have the same success as nurseries, right? Wrong. Actually, what we purchase and what we see is nothing more than perfect timing. That's all there is to it. So in this video, I'm going to refer to commercial nurseries, not small nurseries or family businesses, or actually orchid collectors that sell off their divisions or all of that. No, we're gonna talk about the nurseries that sell us the orchids we see in flower shops and garden centers and all of that. There is a little bit of a difference. Alrighty, so through all of this discussion, you need to keep in the back of your mind one single very important idea. The end goal of any orchid nursery is to sell, nothing more, nothing less. Now, in order to sell, they need to have a beautiful orchid. Now, because beauty is in the eye of the beholder, it's pretty relative what they understand through beauty. So from their point of view, beauty is an orchid in bloom. Doesn't necessarily matter how many blooms it has, how many flower spikes it has, the more the merrier, of course, but the focus is solely on the blooms. If the orchid has blooms, it can be sold. If it doesn't have blooms, they will not ship it to the flower shops. Nobody is interested in orchids if they don't have flowers, except we orchid junkies, but you know what? We are a minority. The target market of an orchid nursery is not orchid enthusiasts necessarily, it's people interested in purchasing a beautiful flower. That's it. Alrighty, so now let's think a little bit about the orchids that we purchase. And here I have an example, typical store-bought cattleya in my case. What do we see with this orchid? Well, it has flowers and it's pretty. It should be good, we purchase it. What we don't think about is actually how old is this orchid. Now, unlike other plants that we can keep in pots, orchids are a little bit different in quite a few ways. One of the ways in which it is different is age. Orchids take quite a long time to mature and be able to bloom in comparison to petunias or pansies. Also, generally, the older an orchid is, the better it will bloom. However, since the goal of an orchid nursery is not to grow that orchid until it becomes a specimen and then sell it, because it would take quite a lot of years, the orchids that we purchase are actually very young if we consider the total lifespan of an orchid, which can be quite indefinite. Generally, what we purchase are orchids who are blooming for the very first time. And this is quite easy to see in my case. So we have some really tiny canes here. These are the seedling canes, they're very young. And after them, we can see bigger and bigger canes until we find the biggest one. And this is actually the one that bloomed. At this stage of an orchid's life, it can be sold. Now, having some experience with orchids, I can predict kind of how old this orchid is, minus the time it took for the seed to develop into a seedling and so on. I predicted this orchid is around 3 to 4 years old. From the moment it was deflasked, it was a tiny seedling. Now, surprisingly, guessing the age of an orchid gives me an idea on when it was repotted. Now, orchid nurseries use organic medium. They use sphagnum moss, bark chips most of the times, coconut husk, and as we all keep saying on YouTube and forums and all of that, organic medium needs to be changed periodically because it decomposes, becomes acidic, starts to attack the root system. This is a trait of organic medium that affects all of us, no matter if we are home growers or orchid nurseries. So one of the questions that I got recently was regarding repotting. Somebody asked me if orchid nurseries actually repot orchids to maintain them in good health. The answer is no, definitely not. And furthermore, orchids that we purchase, most of them are not in tip-top condition. They are actually on the verge of declining. The sad part is they start to decline in our care, but there's a logic to that. So going back in time, let's say we have the orchid seedling. After it is deflasked from that agar medium, very sterile medium, it is placed in a water-retentive medium generally. It can be sphagnum moss, it can be the coconut husk cork, depends on the nursery of course. It is potted separately and it is grown. At some point, the orchid starts to come out of the pot. It becomes too big. What nurseries do then is simply unplug the orchid, and put it in a bigger pot with probably a different medium, such as bark chips generally. What they don't do is remove the plug, the sphagnum moss or coconut husk, and many of the times when we purchase orchids and we repot them, we do find that plug. Now, why don't they remove that plug? Simple. They risk setting back the orchid, and that only translates in a delay of cell time. And this phenomenon drives even more expenses from the nursery. The more time an orchid spends at the nursery, the more water it will require, or fertilizer, time, care, light, and so on. So the goal of an orchid nursery is not to hang on to that orchid for years and years and years. Nope, the goal is to sell it as fast as possible. Now, being that that little plug is kind of tiny, it will not start to affect the entire medium and attack the orchid overnight. It takes time. But believe me, it does start to decompose and it does start to spoil the new medium and inevitably the roots. Reason why in that plug, most of the times we can only find dead roots. Now, after this repotting from the tiny pot to the bigger pot, an orchid spends around 2 more years in the orchid nursery until it becomes blooming size, until it becomes this. This orchid probably was repotted when it was like this. It probably only had 3 bulbs. And then in the new pot, it created 1 pseudobulb in 1 year and the second one in the 2nd year. And then it was sold. Now, you might already know that organic medium should be changed every 2 years. Well, what do you know? It just coincides with the moment we purchase the orchid. Now, why don't nurseries repot orchids just before they sell them to us, if they know the medium is already starting to break down? Well, it's simple. If they repot the orchid, yet again, they're gonna set it back. And yet again, this only means more time spent in the nursery, more expenses until the orchid blooms and can be sold. Orchids in commercial nurseries cannot be sold without flowers. So in the end, it's all about timing. We purchase the orchid, we have it in bloom, and then we decide to repot it. And what do you know? Most of the roots are already in bad condition. Of course, it's not the case with all orchids. Phalaenopsis are quite troopers when it comes to this, but mainly Cattleyas, Miltoniopsis, many Oncidiums, they all have pretty bad root systems when we purchase them. And many of us think, well, it's something we did. All of this happened in my care. Actually, no, it was supposed to happen. It was normal to happen because the medium just reached the end of its use. And the orchid nursery did not repot it. Now, you might think, well, everything would be so much better if orchid nurseries would not concentrate on selling orchids, but just caring for them better. No, it's not the case. Because you see, the more time orchids spend in the nursery and are treated properly, the more money they will eat. Thus, the more expensive they will be when we purchase them. Do we want expensive orchids? No. Can we do with the orchids that we find, even if not in good condition? Yeah, we can. It's not like we spend a fortune on orchids. Yes, they're more expensive than other plants, but they grow so much more slower than other plants. It's a process to propagate them. They eat a lot of money, and the price they have today reflects all of that care, all of that process, all of those resources invested in them. So in the end, the orchids in the flower shops and supermarkets and garden centers are far from being perfect. Just because they have flowers doesn't mean they are in perfect condition. And that is the illusion I was talking about at the beginning of the video. How do orchid nurseries do it? Well, of course they have a greenhouse and fans and maybe artificial light and maybe a better watering system, but in the end it's all about timing. Nursery orchids do need repotting. Their medium does decompose, just like for every one of us. But the nursery is not interested in repotting it. It is solely interested to grow the orchid until it blooms and is able to be sold. Unfortunately for us, it coincides with the moment that the medium starts to break down and affects the orchid. Can nurseries do anything about that to provide better and healthier orchids? At this point, no. If they would use inorganic medium, it would increase the cost. At this moment in time, the business of sphagnum moss and bark chips is so well developed because it has been used for such a long time. They have special agreements. There are so many providers of these mediums that it's inefficient to change medium into an inorganic one, let's say. Does it work for us? Yes, it still does. It's a little bit frustrating when we get an almost dead orchid, but many of the times we do still get orchids that can be saved, that can be repotted. They're setback, but that's that. And what do? Well, we try to invent new solutions of growing orchids in inorganic mediums, because our goal is not to maintain an orchid for 2 years and then sell it and give it away. No, our goal is to maintain it pretty much as long as we can, without disturbing it, just like orchid nurseries. But our way of not disturbing orchids is a little bit different. And pretty much that's the end of the story. This is why many orchids look great when we purchase them, but then shortly after they start to decline. And in many of the cases, it's really not our fault. It's just how things are supposed to be. And pretty much that's the gist of things with the illusion of the perfect nursery orchid. As I was saying, I am excluding here from passionate growers who grow a collection of orchids to sell and all of those things. Those are different. I was just referring to the big commercial nurseries here. So alrighty guys, thank you for watching. Hope you found this interesting and hope it shed some light on how orchid nurseries function and what their goal is. And you know the drill, don't forget to rate this video down below. If you liked it a lot, a share would be wonderful. And don't forget to subscribe to my channel if you'd like to see regular orchid and plants videos. And if you'd like to be the first one who comments, just turn on notifications so you never miss any of my videos. And with that said, I'll see you all next time. Bye!